5 Live.
Now, if you're worried about the cost of a house, you're not alone. Prices are rising by more than 8% a year in London. Other hotspots around the country are also seeing increases. The Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors fear another boom with a crash to follow. It wants the Bank of England to step in and limit rises to 5% a year. Simon Rubinson speaks for the RICS.
When house price inflation hits a certain level, there will be a reaction from the Bank of England to try and slow things down. We're trying to avoid the market lurching from bust to boom and back to bust again.
Should we be worried about another crash? Do you think it's on its way? It would cost people their homes again like we've seen recently, or leave them with negative equity? If you're hoping to move, maybe you're being priced out of the market already, pick up the phone to us tonight, 0500 909 693. Maybe you've been trying to sell your property and you're hearing about how demand is soaring and you still can't get rid of yours. Give us a sense, in other words, of what the housing market is like where you live, wherever you live in the UK. 0500 909 693. Shane Kennedy lives in Derby. Hello, Shane.
Hello, good evening, Steve.
Hello there. So you're wanting to move house. Your family's growing up, or growing, should I say.
Yeah.
What's the problem?
Really, the problem that I've got is that the cost to change from where I am. I'm just in a normal sort of run-of-the-mill terraced house in the centre of Derby. I'm looking towards too lavish, something like a 3-bedroom semi, but in a nicer area, so I can get the children into a bit of a better school. And the cost to change is just too far out of what I consider a realistic cost. I'd be exposing myself and my family to quite a large level of debt, which I find a little bit intimidating, to be honest with you.
So are you kicking yourself for not having bought during the downturn?
Yeah. Well, there's been a little bit of a drop in house prices, but I don't think we've restored the link between earnings and real house prices, to be truthful, Stephen.
And what type of money scares you? What are you talking about here?
Well, if I looked at, just take the average man who would earn £25,000 a year, and we take the average sort of house price at £170,000. That's going off the figures from the Halifax and just average salary figures. That's an average take home of about £1,600. If I took on the average house with the average salary, I'd need to be paying £1,000 a month out over 25 years at 5%. So that, to me, is taking up the vast majority of that, my salary if I was an average wage earner, just to service the debt. That's completely unrealistic. That would leave me £600 a month to clothe my family, feed my family, gas, electric, run a car. It's just not feasible, Stephen.
Stay there, Shane. Jonathan Davis is an economist and wealth manager. Hello, Jonathan.
Hello, Stephen.
Hello there. Colin Barkley, estate agent in Belfast. Hello, Colin.
Evening, Stephen.
Hello. Colin, we hear, and obviously the markets will be different depending on where people are living in the UK, but we hear of this concern that we could be creating another bubble now.
Certainly not in Northern Ireland. We've had our boom and we've certainly had our bust over the last 6 years or so. We think we're now just about bottoming out, but I think a lot of lessons will be learnt, and so I'm certainly not worried about the market overheating over here. It certainly did happen in 06, 07. Prices went up by a ridiculous amount. It wasn't natural, it wasn't sustainable, and it's caused all sorts of problems since.
But if you look at the UK as a whole, and you look at what we've got at the moment, we've got low interest rates. Interest rates can't go much lower. The Bank of England base rate, 0.5%, as you know, Colin. The government artificially supporting the housing market with subsidy and making it easier for people than it might be in the future. Do you not think, looking at that's a bubble being created when you hear of these price rises in London?
London has always been a very different market. Northern Ireland has been different to the UK as a whole, but even London is way different to most of the regions, and it has its own issues, and it might have a weighting in terms of salaries and that sort of thing. But I think if you look at the market across the UK, I think it had its boom in the late 80s, and then it hit the ceiling, and there was a period of about 5 or 6 years in the early 90s where prices were reasonably static. At that time in Northern Ireland, we were starting from a lower base, but we were moving steadily. And I always felt that a market of 5, 6, 8% per annum increase was healthy and sustainable. There were no huge winners, but there were no huge losers.
8% increase is sustainable. Jonathan, do you agree with that?
As it happens, the incredible manipulation of house prices and indeed the housing market by this government, the last government and so on, all the governments, in fact, for the past about 5 decades, yes, actually the next 2 or 3 years, 8% per annum growth in house prices, I think is likely. That's barring some major shock coming from outside of the UK, and assuming there isn't, then yes, all these ridiculous socialist initiatives by the Conservative-led government will indeed boost house prices and the market for the next couple of years.
Can I comment there, please?
Go on, yeah, of course you can.
Well, if we took the average house price, which is about £170,000, and took just a 5% increase, within sort of 4 years, the average house price would be over £200,000. And within 10 years, it would be over £276,000. Just how would I be expected to fund that sort of amount of money to buy an average house? Could that be explained to me, please?
If I can respond to that, the government initiatives have certainly made it very easy for people to get finance to quote buy unquote a property, bearing in mind, of course, when you borrow 95%, the last thing you're doing is buying, but they call it help to buy. Actually, it's help to sell. So because of that easy money becoming available again, paid for, and people need to get this by everyone else, and indeed the next generation in particular, then yes, unfortunately, a lot of people will take part in it. They will take the money, they will borrow vast amounts of money, and they will boost house prices and the market.
But come on, Jonathan,
you can get it. It's there for you.
Yeah, you're calling the government's idea crazy. It is slightly more nuanced and slightly more complicated than that, isn't it? Because it's not just about the government wanting to support house prices willy-nilly. Consumer confidence can often come from people being confident about their home. People release in the past, as you well know, equity from their home. If people are buying and selling homes, then there's a whole industry around that. Solicitors and removal men and people moving up and tax revenue to the exchequer, stamp duty. So it is far more complicated than you simply saying the government is artificially doing it on a whim.
Yeah, well, that of course is the standard media concept. Germany didn't create an economy based on buying and selling houses and having estate agents running about like bees all over the place. It built an economy because it made things that people actually want to buy across the world. We have an economy based on debt. The only reason why the government has done these initiatives is because, unsurprisingly, that's their job. They want to win the election. That's what the last lot did. That's what the prior lot did. The fact is, the housing market, if it's rising, it wins elections. If it's falling, it loses elections.
So you would continue.
But it is not good for the economy.
So you don't think it's good for the economy to help the construction sector?
Well, that is such a nuanced question. Nobody wants any particular sector to go down, but a sector, an industry which is based upon some parts of the society taking out vast debt so that other parts of society can continue living at large, isn't an economy based on sound economic principles. It's based on debt, which at some point has to be paid back. This government, for example, is borrowing £120 billion a year just for basically 1 or 1.5% growth. I'm telling you, that sort of number, it doesn't bode well.
So do you think property prices in London, that bubble will burst anytime soon?
Well, the answer to your question is nobody knows, but because it depends on what happens outside of the UK. You're asking specifically about London, and we know that 60% of properties bought in London are not bought by Brits. So that depends what happens outside of the UK. If China were to melt down, which is possible, indeed probable, over the next 2 or 3 years, or Japan, or maybe there's a Eurozone crisis, a serious one that can't actually be patched up, then yes, London will fall apart. But until one of these major shocks happens in the economy globally, no, London will keep being the bubble that it is.
Jonathan, thank you. Colin Barkley, thank you. Really interested, wherever you are in the UK tonight, maybe you're trying to sell your home, maybe you've been trying to buy a house and you've had to get involved in a bidding war. Give me a sense of what it's like around the UK, wherever you're living. 0500 909